Have you ever stopped to think about what's actually in the products you use every day?
Yeah, things like, the cosmetics you use or even parts in your car.
Exactly. Chemicals are just everywhere.
Oh.
But how do we know they're actually safe?
Well, in the European Union, there's a pretty powerful regulation working on that. It's called REACH.
Right, REACH.
Right.
And it's all about protecting us from potentially harmful stuff. So today we're doing a deep dive into the very latest updates from the European Chemical Agency, that's ECHA,
Mm.
specifically looking at their substances of very high concern list, the SVHC candidate list for 2025.
And our goal here really is to cut through some of that complexity. We want to unpack what these new updates actually mean for everyone.
Define SVHCs properly within that whole Erichi picture.
Exactly. And explore how this, well, it is an intricate system, how it works to protect our health and the environment. Basically give you a bit of a shortcut to understanding chemical safety better.
Okay.
And just to set the scene with these latest additions, the total number of substances on this important list, it's now hit 250.
250. Okay, so let's unpack REACH itself first. What makes it so significant? Its full name is quite a mouthful.
It is registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemicals.
Right. It kicked off back in June 2007. But the real game changer you mentioned, it puts the burden of proof for safety.
Squarely on the companies.
Right, the ones making or importing the chemicals. That feels like a big deal compared to how things maybe used to be.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fundamental shift. The aim is, high protection levels, promoting safer alternatives, making sure substances can move freely in the EU market.
And it even boosts innovation.
That's the idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Encouraging greener chemistry.
Okay, and who does this actually apply to? Is it just the big chemical companies?
No, not at all. It's much broader. REACH applies to basically any manufacturer, importer, or even downstream users.
So companies using the chemicals in their own products.
Exactly. If they place substances on the EU market, whether it's the pure chemical or in a mixture, or even inside a finished product like a chair or electronics, if it's in quantities of 1 ton or more per year, RECH applies.
1 ton. Got it. And you mentioned it has 4 pillars.
That's right. Think of it as 4 key stages. First, registration companies have to submit detailed data.
Okay.
Then, evaluation authorities check that data. Third is authorization, which is where these SVHCs really come into play.
Right.
And finally, restriction, which can limit or even ban certain dangerous substances completely.
Okay, so let's focus on those SVHCs then. We keep saying it, substances of very high concern. What is one, technically?
Well, it's a chemical substance, or sometimes a group of related substances, that ECHA identifies as posing, severe risks.
Severe risks.
Yeah, and it's basically nominated, put forward as a candidate for potentially tighter regulation later on.
So it's like step 1 on a longer road.
Precisely. The first step towards maybe ending up on that authorization list we mentioned, or the restriction list.
Now, the criteria. This is where it gets interesting, you said. How does something get flagged as an SVHC?
Right. The rules are laid out in the RECH regulation itself, Article 57. It covers substances that are carcinogenic,
Cancer-causing,
mutagenic,
causing genetic changes.
or toxic for reproduction. So harming fertility or development, those are often grouped as CMRs.
CMRs.
But it doesn't stop there. It also includes substances that are persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic PPTs.
Meaning they stick around, build up in organisms, and are harmful.
Exactly. Or even very persistent and very bioaccumulative VPVBs. They hang around even longer and build up even more.
Okay.
And then there's a really important catch-all category.
Oh.
Yeah, it covers substances where there's, and I'm quoting loosely here, scientific evidence of probable serious effects, which give rise to an equivalent level of concern.
Equivalent level of concern. What does that mean in practice?
It's crucial. It means things like endocrine disruptors, chemicals that mess with hormones or neurotoxic substances.
Things that damage the nervous system.
Right. They might not fit neatly into the CMR or PBT boxes, but if the scientific evidence shows they pose a similar level of risk, they can still be identified as SVHCs under this clause.
Yeah.
It gives the system flexibility.
That makes a lot of sense. Chemical risks aren't always simple categories. So how does a substance actually get onto this candidate list? What's the process?
It's a pretty open process, actually. A proposal to identify an SVHC can be put forward by the European Commission or by any EU member state. ECHA then publishes this proposal online and opens it up for public comment, usually for about 60 to 90 days.
So anyone can weigh in. Industry, scientists, the public.
Absolutely. They collect all the comments. Then, based on the evidence and the criteria, ECHA's member state committee decides if the substance should be formally identified as an SVHC. If yes, it's added to the candidate list.
And this list gets updated regularly.
Biannually, twice a year. It's important to stress, though, being on the candidate list doesn't automatically mean a ban.
Right, it's a candidate.
Exactly. It signals that the substance is under scrutiny and triggers certain obligations, but it's primarily flagged for future assessment and potential action down the line.
Okay, and that brings us right up to date. The latest news. ECHA just updated this list again very recently.
That's right. June 25th, 2025. They added 3 new hazardous chemicals.
3 more. And that takes the total up to
250 substances now on the candidate list.
Wow. Okay. And this was the second update this year.
It was. There was an earlier one back on January 21st, 2025. That one added 5 chemicals and also updated the information for one already on the list.
So it's a constantly evolving picture. Let's talk about the June editions first. What are these 3 new chemicals?
Okay, so 2 of them were identified mainly because they're very persistent and very bioaccumulative, those VPVV properties we mentioned.
Right. Stick around. Build up.
Precisely. One is technically 11-1113A55 heptamethyl 3 trimethyl oxytrisiloxane.
Okay, listen, maybe not try that one 3 times fast. Where might you find it?
No. You'd find it used as a laboratory reagent, but also in things like cosmetics, personal care products, perfumes, fragrances.
Everyday stuff again.
The second VPVB is decamethyl tetrasiloxane, also used in cosmetics and personal care, plus lubricants, greases, and automotive care products.
Okay, and the third one from June.
The third one has an even longer chemical name, but it's commonly known as reactive brown 51.
Reactive brown 51. Sounds like a dye.
It is, used in textile treatments and dyes. And this one was added because it's identified as toxic for reproduction, a CMR substance.
Got it. So VPVB, VPVB, and toxic for reproduction. Now, what about those 5 added back in January? What sort of things were they?
Let's see, the January batch included one called out specifically for being toxic for reproduction, another long name, but it's often found in things like lubricants or metalworking fluids.
Okay.
Then there were 2 substances flagged for PBT properties, persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. One of those is OOPO, triphenyl phosphorothioate, and another complex reaction mass involving similar chemicals. Then there was another VPVB, octamethyl trisiloxane.
Similar to the June ones.
A bit, yes. And finally, a perfluorinated compound, perfluamine, also flagged as VPVB.
Okay. And where might these January chemicals turn up?
ECHA noted potential uses in manufacturing electronics, as well as in lubricants, greases, and other metalworking fluids. So quite industrial applications there.
And you mentioned one was updated in January, too.
That's right. An existing entry for TRES4 non-ilphenyl branched and linear phosphite. It was already on the list, but the entry was updated still based on its toxicity for reproduction property.
Okay, so the list grows, information gets refined. What happens immediately when a substance gets added? What changes for companies?
Okay, this is key. The moment a substance hits that candidate list, specific legal obligations kick in. For companies dealing with it, whether it's the pure substance, in a mixture, or in an article.
Like what?
Well, first, if you supply the pure SVHC substance, you must provide a safety data sheet and SDS to your customers.
Standard practice for hazardous chemicals, maybe.
Yes, but this becomes mandatory upon SVHC listing. Now, if you supply a mixture, say a paint or an adhesive, that contains more than 0.1% by weight of an SVHC.
0.1%, that's quite a low threshold.
It is. You don't have to automatically provide the SDS, but you must provide it if your customer requests it.
Okay. And what about finished products, articles?
Right. If you manufacture or import articles, again, could be anything from furniture to clothes to electronics containing an SVHC above that same 0.1% weight by weight threshold.
Yes.
You have an obligation to provide your customers, so other businesses, with enough information to allow safe use of the article, and that includes, at minimum, the name of the SVHC.
So businesses need to know what's in the stuff they buy.
Exactly. And crucially, you also have to provide that same information to consumers, like you listening, if they ask for it, usually within 45 days.
Okay, so that's the direct consumer link we talked about earlier.
Precisely. It's your right to know.
That's really powerful. What else? Any other immediate duties?
Yes, there's a big one for importers and producers of articles. They also have to notify ECHA if their article contains an SVHC above that 0.1% threshold.
Notify the agency itself.
Yes, and they have 6 months from the date the substance was included on the list to do this. So for these latest June editions, the deadline would be December 25th, 2025.
And what happens with that notification?
It gets published in a public database run by ECHA called the SCIP database.
SCAP.
Stands for Substances of Concern in Products. It's part of the EU's Waste Framework Directive, aimed at improving waste treatment and recycling.
Makes sense. If recyclers know what hazardous stuff is in a product, they can handle it better.
That's the idea. And one more practical consequence, products containing SVHCs above the threshold generally can't get the EU Eco label.
Ah, the little flower logo. That's
Yeah.
a big deal for companies wanting to market their products as environmentally friendly.
Definitely. It's another incentive to substitute away from SVHCs.
So just to reiterate that consumer point, because it's so direct, you listening right now have the legal right to ask a retailer or supplier if a product you're buying contains any of these 250 substances of very high concern above 0.1%.
Yes, and they have to respond. It's a really tangible way this regulation empowers individuals.
Okay, so that's the candidate list and the immediate impact, but you said it's often just the first step. What comes next for these SVHCs?
Right. Being on the candidate list puts them in line for potential inclusion in one of two more restrictive annexes of REACH. The main one is Annex 14.
Annex 14, what's that?
That's the authorization list. ECHA periodically assesses the substances on the candidate list and prioritizes some for inclusion in Annex 14.
Prioritizes based on.
Based on their intrinsic properties, the volumes used, and the potential for exposure. If a substance gets moved to Annex 14, a sunset date is set.
A sunset date. Sounds ominous.
It kind of is for that chemical's use. After the sunset date, that substance cannot legally be placed on the market or used in the EU unless a specific authorization has been granted for that particular use.
So companies have to apply to keep using it.
Exactly. And it's a tough process. They have to demonstrate either that the risks from their specific use are adequately controlled, or that the socioeconomic benefits of using it outweigh the risks, and critically, that there are no suitable, safer alternatives available.
It sounds like a high bar.
It is designed to be. The goal of authorization is to phase out SVHCs eventually and replace them with safer options.
Can you give an example of a substance on the authorization list?
Sure. Things like chromium trioxide, which is used in metal plating, certain phthalates like DEHP used as plasticizers, some lead chromate pigments. These are all subject to authorization now.
Okay, so that's Annex to the authorization list. What was the other one?
The other main regulatory tool is Annex 7, the restriction list.
Annex 17. How's that different?
Restrictions are generally broader. Instead of requiring authorization for specific uses, a restriction typically sets conditions on or outright bans the manufacture, placing on the market, or use of a substance.
So it could be a total ban, or maybe just a ban in certain products.
Exactly. It could be a concentration limit, like limiting lead in jewelry. It could be banning certain phthalates in toys and childcare articles. It could ban asbestos fibers entirely, or limit polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, in rubber or plastic items that contact the skin.
And these restrictions apply across the board.
Yes, generally they apply to anyone handling the substance in the EU, regardless of the tonnage, and even if the substance itself isn't registered under IECs because it's imported in an article, for example. Restrictions are very direct prohibitions or limitations.
So just to clarify the flow, a substance gets identified as an SVHC and goes on the candidate list.
Check.
That triggers immediate communication and notification duties. Then some of those SVHCs might get prioritized and moved to Annex 14, the authorization list, meaning companies need specific permission to use them after a sunset date.
Correct.
Or a substance, which might or might not be an SVHC, though often is, could be subjected to specific bans or limits under Annex 7, the restriction list.
You've got it. Every substance on Annex 14 was first an SVHC, but not all SVHCs end up on Annex 14, and restrictions in Annex 7 can target substances whether they're SVHCs or not, though many restricted substances do meet SVHC criteria. It's a layered system to manage different kinds of risks.
A layered system, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, who is actually affected by all this? We touched on it, but it sounds incredibly wide-ranging.
It really is. The phrase reach of reach is quite apt. It goes far, far beyond just the companies making the basic chemicals.
Like which industries?
Oh, gosh, the list is huge. Obviously, the chemical industry itself, but also textiles, drapery, leather goods.
Right, we read about that, Di.
Exactly. Plastic processing, the entire cosmetics industry, food contact materials, petroleum processing, printing inks, manufacturers of sports equipment, toys.
Toys, definitely.
The recycling industry is heavily impacted. Electrical and electronic engineering, fine mechanics, optics, automotive, engine and plant production. It's hard to think of a manufacturing sector that isn't touched by RH and SVHC considerations in some way.
That really drives home just how pervasive chemicals are in everything we make and use. And the global nature of supply chains means even if it's an EU rule.
It has ripple effects worldwide for anyone wanting to sell into that massive market. Companies globally need to track these SVHC updates and understand their obligations.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground there. Let's try and pull the main threads together. We've taken a deep dive into these latest SVHC candidate list updates for 2025. We've seen how REACH each works as the foundation, how chemicals get identified as substances of very high concern based on specific hazard criteria.
Like being carcinogenic, PBT, or having that equivalent level of concern.
Right. And we've looked at the immediate consequences, the duties for businesses to communicate down the supply chain, notify ECHA.
And importantly, the consumer's right to know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the potential next steps, authorization under Annex 14th or restriction under Annex 7th, showing that layered approach to managing chemical risks over time.
It's a dynamic system, constantly being updated as science evolves.
Which leads to a final thought, perhaps. You know, as this list keeps growing, we hit 250 now, and science keeps uncovering new potential concerns.
Yeah.
It raises a big question, doesn't it? How can we all, as consumers, as industries, as regulators, best navigate this? How do we balance keeping up with the science and ensuring safety while still allowing for innovation and the use of chemicals that are genuinely essential?
That is the multi-billion-euro question, isn't it? There's no easy answer. It requires continuous vigilance, transparency, investment in safer alternatives, and open dialogue between everyone involved. Staying informed is the first step.
And on that note, if you want to dig deeper yourself, the ECHA website is the place to go. You can find the full SVHC candidate list there, plus detailed info on our REACH.
Definitely recommend it. It's all publicly available.
Well, this has been incredibly informative. Thanks for breaking it down.
My pleasure.
Join us next time for another deep dive into another complex and fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious.